All right, folks, it's time to abolish the U.S. military. I know it's not the first time I've said it, but we have a new reason. And this, to me, is reason enough. This is reason alone to abolish the U.S. military. At least one of the members of the Joint Chiefs was testifying before Congress, and nobody ever watches what Congress does anyway, because they just basically do a lot of bloviating, even when they pass a bill. And like I said, one of the guys who was on the Joint Chiefs, the head of the Air Force, I think he's a lieutenant general. He was testifying before Congress, and Matt Gaetz asked him about some scholarship fund that is associated with the Air Force. I don't know if it's a scholarship for the Air Force Academy, but this is a scholarship fund that is essentially supported by the Air Force, that has their blessing. And Matt Gaetz asked him a very simple question. Anybody should be able to answer this. In the year of our Lord 2023, this is just common knowledge. He was asking him, because this is a scholarship for people who are let's put it this way. It's for women, asterisk, every other category other than essentially straight white men. So it's a scholarship for people who aren't straight men. I should say, they didn't say anything about color, I don't think, in the qualifications. But who knows? I mean, if you're a black man and you walk in and you say, I'd like to sign up for that women's scholarship, you think that they're just going to tell a black man, no, your kind's not welcome here? I mean, talk about some gendered language. And so the scholarship includes, it's gender inclusive, you see. It's trans inclusive. It's non-binary inclusive. It's hermaphrodite inclusive. It's apparently demi-gender inclusive. And so Matt Gaetz asked the head of the Air Force, hey, this program that's associated with your branch that you run, it's offering free scholarships to the demi-gendered. What are the demi-gendered? Could you explain that to me? What does this have to do with, the Air Force's mission? And of course, the guy had no idea. He tried to dodge the question, which is pretty funny, because this is the first time he's ever heard such a ridiculous phrase, and he knows that if he gets caught not knowing what it is, that he'll be canceled, because that's the way this works. You constantly have to adapt to the changing language yourself. In a normal society, culture is what drives language. As culture changes, people come up with new phrases to mean the same thing. That's why we have so many different languages on this planet. That's why everyone doesn't speak the same way, because people are different, and that's okay. But in America, it is the opposite. The language is used to drive the culture. The language is being changed from the top down in order to control us, which very much goes against old Webster's vision. When he created his dictionary, he wanted it to be a dictionary of American English. Specifically, he wanted to validate the English that was spoken, the language of the common man. In the same way that the French eventually declared, no, we are not speaking vulgar Latin. Our language isn't wrong. It's a different language. It's our own language. This is French. It's no longer Latin. The Latin speakers can't claim superiority over us, because we've taken Latin and we've made it our own. And from the beginning, the woke cult has been an assault on the English language. And everything infested, I think, should just be burned down, because it's really nothing of value. They're not doing anything important. Any of these institutions and organizations that have time for this crap, they are obviously redundant, because you cannot focus on doing actual work if you're keeping up with all of this crap. And so therefore, by definition, if you're able to, you're of no service to society. You're a net negative. Easily. It's not hard. Goodyear tires? Bye-bye. We don't need you. We'll buy Firestone, and if they go the same way as you, we can buy Michelin. Same thing with Budweiser. You know how much beer there is in this country? That's why Budweiser was so hurt. But when the Air Force does it, when the Army does it, when Mark Milley says, I want to get to the bottom of all this white rage, there's nothing that is more important to me as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs than to understand white rage. You know that the U.S. military is itself a redundancy. It's a vestigial organ of first the Civil War, then the Great War, then World War II, then the Cold War. The U.S. military it's often been said, this is not controversial, this is not my opinion. This is a very broadly held opinion, or it is my opinion, but it's not just my opinion. I'm not creative, okay? The military is a hammer in search of a nail. And their new nail that they found, it's white rage, it's cisgenderism, it's TERFs, religious people, anti-war people. As I said just a few days ago when we were talking about the National Defense Authorization Act, and I assume that perhaps these hearings have something to do with the National Defense Authorization Act, the reason why they have to pass that every year is because Congress said, the founders wrote into the Constitution that Congress can't create a standing army. They're not supposed to do that. So when they create an army, it's supposed to dissolve after 1 year. So what Congress does is they just renew it every single year. And they've been doing that every year since the end of the Civil War. The first excuse was Reconstruction. Then Reconstruction eventually ended because they didn't want a second Civil War, and that's exactly what it was leading to. Then they turned all their might on the Indians, and they decided, you know what? If we can't use all these toys that we bought and use all this funding that we've got to oppress the South, well, then we'll just go genocide some Indians. And they did that for a couple decades, and eventually they ended up with too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And so the Indians no longer could fight. All their manpower had been exhausted. They were all but wiped out. The buffalo, same thing for them. And so the U.S. had to go overseas in search of a new monster to destroy. And that ended up being the Spanish. And once the Spanish were vanquished, the U.S. couldn't just enjoy the spoils of war, because the spoils of war were the Philippines, which did not want to be ruled by the U.S. or the Spanish. And so look, the U.S. found a new hammer, or a new nail, to test out their shiny hammer on. And they went and whacked away at the Philippines until World War I rolled along. And then they were able to go whack away at the Germans. And so on and so forth. This is the pattern of the U.S. military. It's not only an unnecessary institution, it is an institution that endangers our very safety, even when it's not directly targeting us like it now is. When it targets foreigners, when it's trying to get us involved overseas, they're just creating trouble that's going to blow back on us. What do you think 9/11 was? And so the entire Pentagon, shut it all down, turn it into a museum. I bet it'd be a very nice museum. You could fit a lot of things in there. And you could have probably 5 different museums. Each of the 5 sides. Make it a museum about something different. It doesn't even have to be military matters, although you probably could do a museum for every branch. So yeah, we're well beyond the need to bring all the troops home. We need to bring them home and then literally send them back to their hometowns. Strip them of their uniforms. Try to reintegrate them into society, which is easier said than done. But hey, the sooner we stop making new PTSD cases, the better. And hey, if we lived in a world where the military wanted to be useful to, let's say, actually defend this country, protect the border like the military used to, then maybe you could make the case for that the military should exist. But at this point, they don't do that at all. They're much more concerned with combating Russia. like we heard from the likes of Asa Hutchinson or Mike Pence. That's the military's job. And so if the military doesn't want to be involved in actually defending America, bye-bye. You won't be missed. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.